What is up, guys? Welcome back to Between the Pylons. I'm John Camacho. Thank you so much for watching, and today we are going to be talking about the Atlanta Falcons draft day review. Let's get into it with some of my draft day guidelines. First things first is, did they come into the draft with a plan, and what was the plan? And for the Atlanta Falcons, I think they drafted for need. I do. I think you look at their draft and it's like, yeah, they plugged holes a little bit, and then there's nothing really wrong with that. Did they reach a little bit here and there? Yeah, I would say they did, and I'll explain why I think that. But all in all, I think they took good players, high upside players. I don't think they took a lot of risk. I think they took guys that at their worst, at their floor, they're gonna be, dependable starters. Maybe not all stars, but dependable starters at the very least. So I actually like their draft in general, but they did draft a little bit for needs. And again, that gets labeled as kind of a bad thing sometimes. But here, I liked a lot of the decisions they made. And secondly, did they take an offensive lineman within the first 4 rounds? You cannot name a bad team with a good offensive line, and I think they did, absolutely. The Atlanta Falcons absolutely had to. They still struggle with the offensive line position. They take a center out of Temple in the 3rd round to fulfill that requirement, so they absolutely did that. And then the last one does not count at all. I will say it just because I've said it in every other video, but did they take a wide receiver at all in this draft? And it's only wide receiver because you're supposed to attack the strength of the draft, or at least in my guidelines you are. And no, they didn't. But why would you? I mean, come on. It's the Atlanta Falcons. They're so deep at that position. They've invested so many picks early on at that position, so I don't blame them a bit for going a different direction there. All right, let's get started with their actual picks. In the first round, pick 16 overall, they do take A.J. Terrell out of Clemson, and some would call this a slight reach, and it was. I mean, A.J. Terrell was not labeled as a top 20 pick, but I mean, if you look at a lot of his film, he probably should have been. I mean, this is a guy who can kind of do it all at corner. You can kind of leave him on an island a lot of the time, and Clemson did that a lot. They trusted A.J. Terrell a lot, especially just with the type of defense they played. They put him in some bad spots, and he fulfilled his obligations a lot of the time. People will point to the LSU film this past year where he lined up against Jamal Chase, and there were a couple highlight reel plays that happened on his watch. And yeah, I get it. That's one of those big moments. Draft Twitter blew up and all these things, and people started kind of shitting on A.J. Terrell. I went and watched that film, and I didn't hate it. I really didn't. I didn't look at those plays as plays where it's like, yeah, Jamar Chase is a guy who could have been a top 10 pick in this draft. People would have been talking about him as one of the top picks in this draft, and this draft was absolutely loaded. So next year, he's a shoo-in to be the top wide receiver, top 15, top 10 pick type of guy. And yeah, he struggled a little bit against him. He also was, he was also the first pick in this draft, the best quarterback in this draft by far, throwing the ball to him. So, I mean, it was kind of a really good passing catch situation that he went up against. So I don't blame him too much for having a couple plays where he just, he couldn't be on a complete island with him. And like I said, even the highlight reel plays, he's right there. I mean, he's right there. It was just a great throw and a great catch. And, at a certain point, guys don't deserve to be knocked when the other team just has a great play, right? Like, it is what it is. I get that it's going to happen, and the absolute greats on defense don't let it happen. And then I guess that's kind of where you get to, he's a high floor type of guy, but maybe not the highest ceiling. I think he can be a high level starter. I really do. But that's just the type of player he is. I really like him. I was a little bit higher on him than maybe the rest of the NFL, but actually maybe I wasn't, because he went right in the range I'm kind of fine with. A little bit of a reach by everybody else's standards, and probably by my board as well. But at the end of the day, this is an Atlanta Falcons team that absolutely needed a corner, and I think they got a really good one, a really solid starter from day one. And in the 2nd round, pick 47 overall, they get one of my guys, one of the guys that I talked about a lot on the podcast leading up to the draft, Marlon Davidson out of Auburn. Yes, the 7th pick in the draft was his running mate, Derek Brown, but Marlon Davidson played really, really well. And I felt like he was a shoo-in to be a top 50 pick. I love the placement for this pick. This was right where I really valued Marlon Davidson. I thought he was a guy who could have, maybe sneaked into that first round if the board would have fallen a little bit differently. Maybe he obviously didn't, and I totally am fine with that. I didn't have him in the first round in most of my mocks, but there were a couple mocks where I did throw him in there as a name to watch out for. I really believe in this kid. I really do. No, he's not the world beater that Derek Brown round is. He's not, but he's going to be, again, another high floor starter that they grab here in the second round. And I'm just a huge fan of his upside. I'm a huge fan of another pick in the second round where the Atlanta Falcons are addressing a need on the defensive line and taking a guy who is going to be a solid starter. He has a high floor type of pick, and I like it again here for the Atlanta Falcons. And in the third round, pick 78 overall, the Atlanta Falcons do take Matt Hennessy, a center out of Temple. Love the name, by the way. Matt Hennessy is maybe a little bit of a reach for the Falcons. This is a guy who was not expected to go in the first 2 days, but again, the Falcons absolutely needed help at the offensive line position. They took tackles in the first 2 rounds last year, so now they address the interior. Can he come in and play center right away? Maybe. We'll see. I think that's a tough ask, especially in that division against some of the talent that he would be going up against on a weekly basis, but I really like him at guard, and I think this is, again, another guy who has the opportunity to start right away. This is not a player that I would just pencil in to be a starter right away, but I think he definitely has that possibility. He could absolutely win that role over in training camp. If there is a training camp, we'll see. But I actually like Matt Hennessy. I think it would not surprise me a bit if he ends up being a starting guard in the NFL for the next 8 to 9 years. It would not surprise me a bit, and the Atlanta Falcons would be incredibly happy to get a guy like that in the third round here. All right, and this is the part of the video where I would usually go through all the draft day trades and kind of talk about the value and how everything worked out. They didn't have any trades, and if you would have told me the Atlanta Falcons were not going to make any trades in this draft, I would have told you you're crazy. I really believed that they were one of those teams that were kind of the obvious pick to trade up. I really expected them to do that, trade up early into this draft. They obviously did not do that. I really expected them to make some moves throughout this draft because that was just the rumors that we were hearing, and you know, that's part of the game here. You hear a lot of smoke throughout the leading up to the draft. You hear so much smoke, and some of it's not fire, man, and it wasn't for the Atlanta Falcons. They do not make any draft day moves. Who knows if they had any real intentions of doing so, but they sit and pick. They had 5 picks within the first 4 rounds and got a lot of pretty solid, safe picks, I felt like. And let's go through my closing thoughts here. My favorite move for the Atlanta Falcons was Marlon Davidson. I absolutely love Marlon Davidson. Marlon Davidson was one of the first players that I talked about when we started the My Guys series on the podcast, Between the Pylons podcast, by the way. Check it out every single week. Comes out on Thursday. So he was a guy that I was really high on, guy I really loved that pick in the 4th round at 47 overall. That was right in his range. I felt like I was really worried he was going to fall outside of that range, and I didn't think he deserved to, because I just thought he was just one of those guys that's going to come in and be a starting defensive line, or at least in a rotation on a team for the next 8 to 10 years, and everyone's going to look back and be like, man, that dude didn't go in the 1st round. That's crazy. So I just think the upside of Marlon Davidson is just insane. And then my least favorite pick, I thought they overdrafted a little bit. This kind of gets into players that I didn't really talk about. In the 3rd and 4th round is kind of where I would really struggle with the evaluation a little bit, as far as, it seems like you were kind of reaching for need, which is fine. Teams have to do that sometimes. And then Atlanta Falcons had a lot of holes to fill here, so it made sense a little bit. AJ Terrell, a little bit of a reach. I obviously don't think Marlon Davidson was, but AJ Terrell, a little bit of a reach. I still like the value. I think I understand the Atlanta Falcons saying, hey, he's the 3rd best corner. We're going to get him at the 16. Don't have a problem with that at all, but that's probably my least favorite part of their draft. And the biggest surprise was the fact that there were no moves. I mean, they just weren't active at all. And like I said earlier, I expected them to be. There was a lot of smoke there. Thought there was fire, and there obviously wasn't. All in all, guys, I am going to give this draft an A-. I feel like this is a really underrated draft. I feel like not enough people are talking about the type of players that the Falcons got. High floor type of guys that are going to come in and be starters right away, hopefully. And I think they made themselves a lot better getting players that you're probably going to hit on. You have a high percentage of hitting on. So I'm actually really excited about what the Atlanta Falcons did, and they're trying to keep up. I mean, they made a run at the the end of last season to keep their head coach and keep that nucleus together as far as the front office goes, and they're trying to catch up with the rest of their division. Hopefully they do. Hopefully this is the move. This is the draft that can kind of put them back in that conversation where they were a couple years ago when they had Kyle Shanahan as offensive coordinator and the whole 28-3 and all that. But I'm sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned that. This is a great draft. That's bad memories. Sorry, guys. All right, guys, that'll do it for this episode. Please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. I have a lot of great stuff coming out. I have a couple different web series that I'm gonna bring to the channel that I hope you guys will like. I think you will, and I have a lot more coming out as far as draft, as far as fantasy football. So please hit that subscribe button and follow the journey. Peace out, guys.